Hello, Sales Nation, and welcome to the Ask Will Show. So I've done this in the past, and I seemingly spend half of my life answering your emails, which I appreciate, and your questions over email, over Snapchat, over Instagram. And so I thought, why not just pull them all into one video? I'll answer a whole bunch of them in a row. This will come out every Friday instead of a podcast episode, just to break up the week, hopefully give you some entertainment as well. And so with that said, let's jump straight into them. Rick asks, people push me around too easily as I look young and I'm in B2B. How can I keep control in the meeting without looking like a jerk? Rick, thank you for your question. One thing that it seems obvious when you say it, but something that to put in a process or to make practical was really helpful for me was this idea of frame. So this is, everyone has, typically, if you're not that person, you know the person, in the friend group, loads of fun, loads of energy, brings loads of excitement, and you want to spend time around them, because when you spend time around that person who's full of excitement, of giggles, of fun, of energy, it rubs off on you and you get some of that on you. And so you like spending time with them. Same thing if someone's miserable, it's almost a rapport building thing that goes on in our subconscious, that we get a bit miserable and we start kind of lowering our energy and we get into the frame. So this is what we call it. And you can Google frame, there's tons of articles and posts on it. But I like to think about this when you're dealing with someone who perhaps you think that they are not superior, that's the wrong word, but that you think that they are higher up in the B2B world. They are older, they've got a ton of money, they drive a nice car, they're an executive, they've got authority, whatever it is. You're falling into their frame when you do this. Now, they're looking for relief. They're looking for not your average salesperson, not your average business meeting. So if you go in there with a strong frame of being confident in yourself, confident in what you're going to provide them. Maybe if this suits your personality, it doesn't suit everyone, but I'm relatively high energy. I speak quite fast. So when I go in there, I just keep high energy until they start to fall into my frame. So if they're on a miserable day, I go in, brighten it up for them, just be a little bit daft and silly, take the piss out of them a little bit. But you got to be careful with that, clearly, but there's some elements of rapport breaking and other things included in this. It goes way deep, but essentially if you keep your frame and they fall into yours, you're being the dominant person in the relationship, they're being the slightly more submissive person in the relationship. This helps with your negotiations, influence, and a whole lot more. So I just have to think about what frame you're walking into these conversations with. Are you thinking that they are the authority, that you're looking up to them, you put them on a pedestal? Or are you confident in your own frame, and are you allowing them to fall into you? That's what I'd say. Lawrence asks, favorite guest you've had on the show? Thank you for your question, Lawrence. Favorite guest is Mr. Peter Sage. He taught me all about what money really is, that we tie weird emotional stuff to it. We have our parents. My dad used to say to me, money doesn't grow on trees. It is literally made out of paper. That is literally where it comes from. But essentially, there's almost a scarcity mentality that comes along with that. So we tie all these weird emotions to it. But really, money is just an exchange of value. It's a medium to exchange value. If you have a sheep and I have a horse, and you don't want a horse and I want a sheep, then we go to the bank, trade it in for these pebbles, and I can swap you the pebbles. We can go back and forth, and we don't need to directly have to swap goods to exchange value. That's all money is. Now, with all that said, Peter Sage is currently in prison, and so probably not the best example. Brian asks, which fictional character would be the most boring to meet in real life? Fictional character most boring in real life? Harry Potter. Because, now, I'm a huge nerd. Or, less so perhaps than what I used to be. But in high school, we played and went to LAN parties and played Counter-Strike, literally full on nerds, bunch of lads in a room with energy drinks and beer, just playing computer games, trying to beat other nerds on the other side of the planet, all the way through university. Even though I was getting into music production and in bands, all that kind of good stuff as well, which balanced out a little bit. I would play a lot of Quake 3, 3-4 hours a day at some point. And I was pretty damn good at it. So I'm a huge nerd. And I'm probably going too deep into this scene as Harry Potter isn't real. But he would be potentially... you imagine the parties he could throw with his wizard setting things on fire and all this good shit. And what would he do? He would sit there with a book under a set of stairs and be massively boring. So, weird question, but hopefully that was also a weird answer to match it. Shannon asks, where has the Salesforce mug gone from your desk? The Salesforce mug is gone, and this kind of retro mug that my old housemate gave me when I moved into this place is on here because Salesforce are no longer sponsoring the video element of the show. That kind of deal has come to its conclusion, is wrapped up. They're more interested in driving subscribers to their blog than they are of growing my audience and being on the back of that. That's cool. That's fine. But my priority is always going to be just getting Sales Nation to be as big and as useful as a group, as a conglomerate of individual salespeople as it possibly can. Their mission doesn't really align with ours. And so, no sponsored mug on the desk at the moment. Javon asks, how can I prospect people over and over without coming across like a pest? Javon, he reminds me. And for anyone in the UK has watched Phoenix Nights, they all know Ravon, the DJ. 99% of people listening are just not getting that reference whatsoever. So I'll continue. Essentially, you've just got to not be so selfish. And if you're asking how to not become a pest, you're clearly considering yourself as a pest. The way to not be a pest is to make every interaction useful. You add value. I hate that term. Clearly, we talked about it on the podcast before. It's overused. It's an excuse most of the time when someone, a sales trainer, a sales manager, they know something isn't right. They just tell you to add more value, but they don't explain why. There's no coaching involved in that statement. And so that's why I don't like it. So you need to add insights. You need to add energy to the conversation. You need to add something that they want you to be there. They want that interaction. You could just be stroking their ego. I used to do this with surgeons and medical devices all the time. You go in, you talk about the rugby, you give them a pat on the back. This knee that you're doing is brilliant, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll be invited back the next week. And that's how you build a relationship. And then that eventually leads to business down the line. So it's not cut as dry, it's not cut and as dry as saying, do X, Y, Z. You just need to not be a drain on them. Every interaction you have, you need to give. You need to give this 51% and expect that 49% back over time. Roger asks, I saw on your Snapchat story that you bought a red BMW. Weren't you taking the piss out of people who drove red BMWs a little while back? You are dead right. Did I screw up? I'm not sure. I really like the car. Essentially, what Roger's referring to is I used to come up with the stereotype, and I probably will continue to do it, even though I'm taking the piss out myself at this point, of the red BMW driven by the red-faced sales manager, massively stressed, slightly overweight, hot-headed, going to die of a heart attack at 42. They're driving around in this big red BMW that's screaming, come look at me, give me attention. And what have I done? I've gone from the Mazda RX-8. It was just breaking down too much. And I've moved into an M235i, bright red, nice grey alloys, looks sick, it's super fast. But yeah, I've suckered myself into this and probably got it because it turns heads and gets attention. Alison asks, what will finally break the sales training industry? Alison, you've obviously heard that I've had a bee in my bonnet with the sales training industry in the past few episodes of the show that have gone out in the past couple of weeks. It's been going on now. And you've probably seen the arguments I've had back and forth on LinkedIn about all of this. Essentially, it comes down to sales training. It's a $1 billion industry. 85% of it does not give a positive return on investment. Some people might suggest that 15% gives such a big upside when it works that the downside of it's failing 8 times, nearly 9 times out of 10 is worth it. I'm pretty confident that isn't true. And what we're going to find is sales managers, sales leaders, sales people are just not going to do the traditional, everyone sat in a room, 100 people, 500 salespeople with one trainer. They give some kind of presentation and then they half-assed go around and speak to everyone. It can't work because you cannot learn what someone is good, bad at when you're dealing with 100 plus people, when you're dealing with 50 plus people, when you're dealing with 20 people. It'd be damn sight a challenge to do that. So what I feel is going to happen is all these sales trainers that are doing these big events that one-offs as opposed to monthly training or weekly training, it's going to happen 2 ways. It's going to go in-house, and these companies, especially the big corporates, are going to hire an in-house sales trainer, perhaps help with content, perhaps do other things as well, but a trainer internally. Or these sales trainers are going to stop getting hired and they're going to have to turn into coaches. Now, this isn't as lucrative for them, so this is why they haven't done it in the past. It's you charge far more for being in a room full of 500 people doing the same presentation week and week and week and week versus going out in the field or in the office with each of these people listening to calls. That is not as scalable. It's not as lucrative, but I feel like that's the way that you truly add value if you're going to do this one-on-one interaction versus a podcast or video series or something like that. If you're going to do these one-on-one interactions, that's where the value is going to be added. And that's where it's going to go. And that's what's going to cripple the sales training industry. And that's just my thoughts. Aspen asks, should I focus on closing the incoming leads I have and be a model employee, or should I start cultivating my own network and do my own prospecting? So Aspen, I think you've stumbled onto something here which is really important, and I picked this question out in particular, and we'll wrap up with this one. If you give a shit about the industry you're in, the vertical, if you're selling, I don't know, SaaS software, if you're selling drums, if you're selling something that you're passionate about, if you're selling camera equipment, like the thing I'm looking at here, if you're selling anything like that to industry, B2C, B2B, whatever it is, and you're going to be doing it for the next decade, build your network, because you're probably going to end up in a non-sales role. It could be marketing, it could be leadership, it could be thought leadership, it could be anything. You just don't know. Until you've got that network in place and you've got opportunities coming to you, it's difficult to decipher where you're going to be in 10, 20, 40 years' time. But if you are in sales because you want to earn a quick buck, and you can do that morally, you do that successfully, you can do $250,000 in sales by just following the rules and working damn hard. You don't have to be that skilled in it if you're in the right role, and you don't care about the industry, you don't care about the vertical, then why would you build your network in it? That's how I see the split. If you really care about it, then go for it, do it, because that's where future opportunities will come, none to do with sales, that will be more lucrative, that'll give you ownership of something, that'll be project-based, that'll be more useful for you, give you more flexibility in that kind of 10, 20, 30, 40-year period. But if you just want to make money, do what you're told. And there we have it. If you want to ask your questions, I'm taking questions exclusively because I'm trying to build my Instagram profile for my personal page over at Will Baron Yo on Instagram. I'll link it in the video description below this if you're watching this on YouTube, or in the show notes over at salesmanpodcast.com for everyone else who visits over there. DM me, send me a chat, whatever. Get your questions in there and I'll answer them. And I'll speak to you again next week.